Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Muriel and in this video I will be doing a book review for Revelation Space written by Alistair Reynolds. As I've already alluded to in some of my previous videos, when we were together, David got to pick 5 novels for my 2022 TBR. Revelation Space is the third of those novels. I had vaguely heard of Alistair Reynolds as an author before, but had never read anything written by him. I saw Revelation Space was published in the Science Fiction Masterworks collection, which is always a plus in my book. A superficial one, mind you, but still a plus. And David had also told me it was hard science fiction with bird-like humanoids and that it didn't have any sexism whatsoever, if I recall correctly. So all that means I was actually kind of looking forward to this one. So what is this about? On the planet Resurgam, an archaeologist named Dan Sylvester, that's how I'm pronouncing it, is obsessed with the amarantin, a bird-like alien sentient species long extinct, because he believes they were directly responsible, despite their initial apparent lack of advanced technology, for the apocalyptic event, described as having been some sort of massive solar flare basically, that not only wiped their species and civilization out, but the entirety of life on their planet. Parallel to this, on the planet Yellowstone, a professional assassin and ex-soldier named Anna Curry is hired, or rather force-hired, to carry out a very peculiar hit job under very strange circumstances, to say the least. And parallel to that again, on the colossal, and I mean colossal spaceship, the Nostalgia for Infinity, the cryogenized captain of which suffers from a strange machine and flesh-melting virus, Triumvir Ilya Volyova tries to conceal the murder of her gunnery officer. As you can probably imagine, these 3 characters and their narrative strands all end up entangled as you progress through the story, because that's just always how it goes. For hard or harder science fiction, since there are no absolutes when it comes to this really, I thought Revelation Space displayed a decent balance between more technical or sciencey, in this specific case physics-related writing, and a more standard narrative style, shall we say. At times, the two even combined into bits of what I'll call scientific lyricism. Like with this paragraph. It looked like a biology lesson for gods, or a snapshot of the kind of pornography which might be enjoyed by sentient planets. That's pretty inspired, don't you think? I certainly do in any case. That being said, I can't deny the science writing felt a bit info-dumpy at times. I didn't necessarily mind all that much because I find that stuff interesting, but I do know a lot of people don't want too much non-fiction exposition in their fiction, so that's something to keep in mind if you were thinking about picking this book up. The chapters tended to be short to medium length, and there was compelling, cinematic, I would argue, action writing, which definitely gave Revelation Space a non-negligible popcorn factor, as I like to call it. It is a multiple points of view story as well. You basically get those of the 3 main characters I mentioned in the synopsis. The story follows a straightforward present to future narrative direction, though at times, and I actually like this, there are mismatches in the years given in the epigraphs of each chapter, depending on the geospatial position of the characters, to account for the time debts incurred by non-FTL space travel. This is indeed a space opera without FTL space travel. And you know, that's just the kind of realistic or science accurate, more science accurate than not in any case, detail I always appreciate in my science fiction. I must note one aspect of the novel structure that bugged me though. The author had a tendency to end chapter sections on a mini cliffhanger basically, before hopping to a different point of view in the immediate future. This point of view would then explain away the climax of the preceding section. And this basically amounted to a lot of telling, but not showing, if you see what I mean. And after a while, this became rather tedious, since it gave a bit of a choppy feeling to the narrative in places. Going to get this straight out of the way, if you need likable characters in your SFF, this is probably not the best book fit for you. All the main characters are either selfishly driven assholes, shall we say, or outright something paths. You can decide which specific flavor of that for yourselves. There is one secondary character that I found somewhat likable, and she does serve as a kind of counterweight to Dan Sylvestre, but otherwise, well, okay, I suppose Anna Corey as well displayed a decent measure of conscience, but the thing is, I thought her characterization sometimes blurred with that of Voliova, who for her part definitely displays selective empathy or morality, shall we say. None of the characters are outright monsters, right? But none of them seem particularly pleasant to hang around, is how I would put it. On the plus side, the female leads were just as assholish, self-serving, and obsessively driven as the male one. David was right about this. There is no sexism, no misogyny that I could detect in the world of Revelation space. No racism or colorism either that I could see now that I think about it, so yay for that. There is also a non-platonic, aka romantic relationship leading to a marriage, briefly showcased in the story, and it was not cringe. So again, yay for that. The characterization of the protagonist was decent overall, though this is definitely not a character-driven novel. I would argue Sylvestre gets the most fleshed out of the three main characters, because like I said, Kuri and Voliova blurred together at times for me. I'll also briefly mention the fact there is a digitized consciousness, or rather real person mimicking AI construct in the story, and he plays a non-negligible role in the unfolding of its events. It was also decently realized, and the banter it exchanges with Sylvestre specifically was, yes, somewhat engaging. So Revelation Space is classified as a space opera, and the space opera world of Revelation Space is relatively young compared to the few others I've encountered in fiction. I think the story takes place in the year 2500 and something, so, you know, there is no thousands of years old feudal empire a la Dune here. No. There is no, well, centralized governing body, really. I can't recall whether Earth is even mentioned or not, but you basically learn of a main human settlement on a planet called Yellowstone, another one on a world called Sky's Edge, and the scientists founded one on Resurgam, the planet on which the bird-like humanoid Amarantin once lived. All those settlements seem to function in a relatively independent fashion, which is also a function of the fact there is, like I said, no FTL space travel, so points for realism there, if you see what I mean. However, this also means the world felt a bit small, or small-ish at times. Now, whether that's ultimately an issue for space opera as such, I don't really know, nor do I have a particularly strong opinion about it, to be honest. You are made aware of several cultural or political cultural factions of human beings, and you learn there is a taboo of sorts surrounding artificial intelligence, at least in the culture you find on the planet Yellowstone. It doesn't amount to, you know, something like the Butlerian jihad in the Duneverse either, but this world is not that advanced technology-wise when it comes to computers and shit. At least on planets, because you do have a faction of human beings called the Ultras that mostly, if not entirely, live on spaceships and are heavily modified with either biotech or cybernetics. In this respect, I was fairly strongly reminded of Hyperion's Ousters, if you're familiar with that. Some Ultras even get extra uppity or proud about the fact they've never set foot on an actual planet. And they inhabit massive spaceships, like the Nostalgia for Infinity. Also, can we take a second to appreciate how beautiful that name is? Though that particular craft is considered exceptional even among, you know, regular spaceships for a couple of reasons. Now, all of that was well realized, but at times I felt like the characters' psyches didn't suffer quite enough from the consequences of, well, traveling through space like this, especially since it does seem like a relatively young space opera world. I mean, to be fair, all of the characters don't exactly have the most normal or balanced of psychologies, and the Ultras themselves are kind of seen as not fully human anymore. But I guess I'd be interested to see a story that zooms in on the effects transitioning to an actual space-traveling age would have on broader human psychology. Something akin, if you will, to the skillfully conveyed trauma acquired by the Ark ship humans in Children of Time, for example. Because, I don't know, at times it all feels a bit too easy in these types of stories. Though yes, I acknowledge this wasn't the point of Revelation Space, and that's perfectly fine. It's just a thought I had while reading it. There is a sort of AI construct, like I said, and a flesh and machinery melding virus. And yes, this opens the door to theming about the nature of consciousness and selfhood, though I'd argue you never get far beyond the threshold with that, but more on that in a minute. There are also big and scary, and I mean really big and really scary, weapons involved in the story, playing off of neat physics concepts, a bit like Interstellar does, but I'll get back to that as well. Then there are the sentient, or pseudo-sentient, alien species, but you don't get that much of them ultimately. A bird like Amarantin, for example, which I was really looking forward to, felt like little more than a plot device at the end of the day, and I was a bit disappointed by that. I expect a lot more from the super evolved ravens in Children of Memory, let me tell you. I mean, okay, to be clear, sentient alien species are at the heart of the main idea being played around with in the book, but I didn't get enough of any single one of them. There are the mysterious shrouders existing behind a dark or antimatter field or something. Do not quote me on that. They play a part, yes. There is /are the pattern jugglers as well, an oceanic superorganism of sorts that absorbs thought and consciousness patterns from other sentient species, and which reminded me of the thing you have in Stanislav Lem's Solaris, if you're familiar with that work. And this was also cool, yes, but something was just missing. Things are hinted at, but left largely unresolved, which I guess does make sense given this is the first book in a trilogy, but still, I was a bit miffed about that. The main issue I had with Revelation Space was the relative lack, in my opinion, or superficiality at least, of the theming. It all felt a bit empty at the end of the day. I was like, that's it, really? No, there isn't nothing either, right? This basically presents a resolution of the Fermi paradox, which encapsulates the conflict between the, as of now in any case, lack of obvious alien life elsewhere in the universe, and the theoretical models which posit it should, in fact, exist out there. So, to simplify, we have big shiny cosmos. So where them aliens at? I'd argue it's pretty arrogant and presumptuous of us to assume we are A, capable of finding traces of sentient alien life given our relatively young technology and given the immensity of the universe, and B, that if there are sentient aliens out there, they automatically have the tech to contact us, or, the freaking desire to do so in the first place. But anyway, another debate for another day. Revelation Space also goes for a mildly cosmic horror vibe, if you will, with its resolution of said Fermi paradox, which I assume borders on dark forest theory territory, a bit like the Three Body Problem series does, but I haven't read that series, so I can't speculate too much about that either. And yes, there's a smidgen of theming when it comes to the nature of consciousness, etc., though like I said previously, it felt pretty light overall. Basically, there really wasn't much for me here. This book reminded me so much of Interstellar, a movie I did not like, unpopular opinion perhaps, when it came to plot, theming, or characters, but which I did like when it came to neat physics-derived CGI. And the music, because Hans freaking Zimmer, am I right? In this regard, it had a positive entertainment factor, and I guess this is really the crux of the matter with Revelation Space for me. It has a significant popcorn factor, with big physics, big scary weapons, a million years old interspecies conflict, which is only kind of hinted at in book 1, a colossal and creepy spaceship, and narrative pyrotechnics. And this is completely legit, right? It's just not my personal preference. I enjoy being entertained through literature, yes, but I first need to be engaged intellectually and or moved emotionally / spiritually. I need more brain food than I do dopamine shots, basically. Whereas I am a lot more flexible with this when it comes to cinema or video games, whether on the small or big screen. I just didn't get the right ratio of that stuff for my personal tastes in Revelation space, which is why I'm sure this would be a great pick for lots of science fiction readers, and why, unfortunately, I was a bit disappointed with it. So this was good, but disappointing. That's the takeaway here. Great physics-derived pyrotechnics, like I said. Neat scientific concepts, most definitely, but not much in terms of greater thematic fodder emerging out of all of that. Or in terms of emotional involvement, for that matter, since I could take or leave the characters, though, again, that's not necessarily that big of a deal for me given my reader type. I gave Revelation Space a 7 out of 10, which is not a bad score by any means, but I will not be pursuing the trilogy. From the little I've read, it goes downhill from here, and doesn't seem like it will feel particularly satisfying to me by the end of it. That being said, yes, I would recommend book 1 if you want entertaining, harder science fiction. It most definitely has value on that front. So on that note, I hope you found this review enjoyable, informative, engaging, all those good things. If you want to share your thoughts about this novel, please feel free to do so, or on the Discord server. There is a link for it in the description box down below. But in the meantime, I hope you'll have a lovely day, evening, or whichever time of day you prefer. Do take good care of yourselves. Thank you for the continued support, and I shall see you all reasonably soon in another video. Probably another book review. Until then, bye-bye.